All right, welcome everyone to today's International Parking and Mobility Institute Shop Talk. I'm Kim Fernandez, IPMI's Director of Publications, and I'll be assisting our panelists with today's event. As a reminder, today's Shop Talk is being recorded and will be posted to IPMI's YouTube channel. As we get started, please use the chat box to introduce yourself. Click the chat icon at the bottom of your screen and type your message and click send. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout today's event, so please use it at any time to ask questions, raise points, or share your thoughts. If you have a webcam and you're comfortable, we ask you to please turn it on so we can all get to know each other and interact face to face. We're starting today's event with all participants muted. When we get to the conversation part of today's program, please let us know in the chat you'd like to speak. We'll call on you to please unmute yourself and jump in. If you're on the phone, you click *6 to unmute your line. Before we can begin today's conversation, David Honorato, CAPP, IPMI's chair, would like to say a few words. Dave?
Thanks, Kim, and good afternoon or good morning to those of you joining us on the West Coast. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Shop Talk, Diversity Rising Through the Ranks. This session builds upon IPMI's first fireside chat held nearly a year ago, which began the discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our industry. Gary Means will once again lead a panel of experts on where our industry is now in relation to DEI. Gary, I want to thank you for initiating this discussion nearly a year ago and continue to keep the discussion at the forefront of our industry and membership. Lastly, I hope you'll be able to join us in Tampa November 29th for IPMI's Conference and Expo. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's host, Gary Means, CAPP and Chair-elect of IPMI. Gary, the floor is all yours.
Thanks so much, Dave, and thanks everybody for joining this. I think people are still rolling in, seeing a ton of great friends in the industry, and we really want you to obviously pay close attention, but at any point that you might have a question or comment, please use the chat, and hopefully at the end we'll have some questions come in from the group here. But again, thanks everyone for joining us, and it's an honor for me to be joined or connected with the esteemed panelists that we have today. And I'm going to do a quick little round introduction, and then we're going to get going with our program. So first off, I'll start off with Richard Easley, CAPP. He is president of E Squared Engineering. Hey, Richard, it is so great to have you with us. And can you tell us just a little bit about E Squared Engineering and your role and what you all do?
Thanks, Gary. Hello, everybody. My name is Richard Easley, and I'm the president of E Squared Engineering. It's a little company I started just a couple of days ago. Well, actually, that's now 23 years ago. And we specialize in ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems, so technology, in the transit industry, the parking industry, commercial vehicle, freight industry, toll industry, traveler information. We do work we've been blessed, we've been doing work in 34 states in 22 countries around the world. And you're looking at 1/3 of the company. We're really small, but we're darn good at what we do. And I will say that I was just contacted by Mr. Conrad, who's in the square there on your screen, not too long ago, and we had a retirement. Anyway, it looks like I'm your newest board member of IPMI, so I'm looking forward to working with all of you on that.
Congrats,
Thanks.
Richard.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, and Richard didn't go into any of this, but he's on about a gazillion boards and committees, and I don't know how you've had time to lead a successful company that you own with all your volunteer work, but that's a testament to your personality, and it's just great to know you, and looking forward to hearing from you later as we move along. Next is one of my newest friends in the industry, Terrence Gilmore. So Terrance is the Senior Vice President, the Central East Coast region with LAS Parking, but also heads up their diversity, equity, and inclusion department group efforts. Terrance, tell us a little bit about your current role and what you're doing there with LAS.
Hey, hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Gary, it's been a pleasure to get to know you here over the last few months. I've been now with LAS for about the last 12 years, and I've always been in operations. I've been in the parking business for close to 25 years now, always in the operations background. And as you mentioned, I'm the senior vice president, which we call the Central East Coast at last, but really it's the mid-Atlantic part of the U.S. That I oversee. But I guess it's probably been for about the last 18 months or so now. I've also assumed the role of heading up our DE&I initiatives within the company. I oversee a committee of 8 to 10 folks, and we really drive 6 initiatives through the organization and spend a lot of work on that. So it's been incredibly rewarding, something I've certainly enjoyed. I've learned a lot from and have gotten heavily involved with. So I'm educating myself on a day-to-day basis and learning a lot, but it's definitely made my role inside of the industry all the more fulfilling. So happy to be here and happy to be able to participate in this shop talk. I know more things like this need to happen and take place. I know we're doing a lot of this internally within our company, and I'm happy to do it for IPMI as well.
Thanks a lot, Terrence. And by the way, folks, if you haven't, just click on the chat icon down at the bottom of your screen, and then you can see what's going on in chat if you haven't done that. But Kim has put each of the, as we go around through the members, their full bio up, so you can see Terrence's is up there. Now, I'm going to move to Keith Hutchins, Director of the Municipal Parking Department in the city of Detroit, doing all kinds of great things up there. Keith, it's such a pleasure to have you with us also. Please tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this great panel. We're excited. My name is Keith Hutchings. I'm the Director of the Municipal Parking Department in the city of Detroit. We are approaching parking with a renewed vigor, realizing that it is critical in the quality of life issues in urban settings with congested mixed use of residential and commercial activity, also understanding the significant importance it plays in economic development and overall economic growth of a region if properly addressed. We are trying to really push parking to new levels of management to address issues like congestion and pollution, but also use it as a driver to economic development and to unify a economic region. We think, we're a little bit biased in terms of how we approach parking. We think parking is really a driver there. One of the few disciplines in transportation mobility and parking that actually is self-funded. We typically can not just fund ourselves, but bring revenue to that. So I think it's important for us to have involvement in how the industry is shaped. We also believe that mobility is a critical part of how we address how parking is used and understanding those trends and the technology going forward.
Awesome. And we're going to keep watching what you're doing up there in Detroit. I know there's some great things to come. You're probably losing your hair and might look like me at some point if you keep doing all the fine things you're doing up there. All right, let's go to Tiffany Peebles, who is also in the state of Kentucky. She is the Director of the Parking Authority in Louisville, Kentucky. And Tiffany, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your current role there in Louisville.
Sure. Thank you, Gary, and welcome to everyone. I was just saying a few minutes ago how encouraged I am that the amount of attendees for today's session, and I'm very excited and honored to be a part and humbled to be able to speak a little bit about this topic. My background is obviously in parking. I've been working for the Parking Authority and the City of Louisville for the last 26 years. So not everyone loses their hair from working in parking. Thank God, Gary, I'd get out immediately. But we have 15 parking garages and we operate about 4,800 on-street spaces. And then we are a huge economic engine within our city. So we get involved in pretty much the last leg of development here. So it's been a very exciting journey. We are self-sustaining, so we often have little people's hands trying to get in our money, but we like to use the money to bring new projects to the city. The initiative that Gary invited us to be a part of sometime last year, I'm just, as I mentioned before, very honored to be here and look forward to making some changes in our industry, even to the extent of leading our industry in what's very much needed in diversity, inclusion, and equity, and how do we make that happen. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Tiffany. All right, folks, now we know a little bit about our panelists. We're going to start asking them a few questions to try to stay on the topic of today, which is rising through the ranks. So what we hope to accomplish today is to talk about things that may help individual minorities to rise through the ranks, maybe some good or bad or what to do, what not to do type of stories or answers or anecdotes. And then we want to speak to our companies, leaders in the companies. How can we help people rise through the ranks? So we'll kind of take this in a two-part approach. But first, we'll talk and let our panelists give a little bit of their own stories in a couple of questions that we'll have for everybody. So I'm going to start, Richard, with you. This is a pretty interesting question. I can't wait to hear how you all will answer it and in your own different ways and backgrounds. But what happened that helped you rise up the ladder or rise through the ranks, and what made the difference?
Thank you. What a great question, Gary. I wish I had thought of that one.
I wonder who that came from.
All right, guys. I'll obviously we're all gonna be very candid. For me, what started my journey to rise through the ranks, as you say, it was really largely exposure to others that had a different life and a more secure life, and it was something that I wasn't really used to seeing. Again, it goes back to exposure to other folks, and other folks that really, well, they were no smarter than I was. You know, that people had lives that were what I considered good, and they weren't special. You know, and this whole mindset of folks that are up the ladder, I know better now. They were better. They had so much more. They had straight A's. They had whatever, but they didn't have what I had. And it wasn't true. And so I learned that. And then there's somebody, if you guys have ever heard, and raise your hand if you ever heard of a guy named Zig Ziglar. If anybody's ever heard of Zig Ziglar. Well, I started listening. My wife and a friend of ours worked for IBM, and he used to listen to Zig, and he'd let us borrow the tapes. And something Zig said that really stuck with me, and it was an anecdote about a kid that was really hustling in a store, putting food on the shelf, putting cans of groceries on the shelves, and Zig was talking to his son, saying, "Boy, that kid there, he's going to get a big raise." Well, Dad, how do you know he's going to get a raise? Because if he doesn't give him a raise, somebody else will. When you work that hard, he can't afford to pay him a low wage. And I thought about that, and I thought, interesting, because a lot of times we work for our money, as I did. And so I took that lesson, and when I worked for an association called ITS America, we would travel. I was responsible for some things on a national level, but we had a limited budget. But I knew there were things I wanted to do and see and learn to make me better at my job. And so I would put in requests. In this case, let's say it was Sean at IPMI. Sean, there's this event. It would really help us if and Sean say, "Look, our budget's low. Richard, you can't go. We can't send." And so a lot of people said, "Well, hell, if he's not going to send me, I'm not going to go." And my stance was based on Zig. I'm going to take the money and I'm going to go myself out of my own pocket, because my thought was, if I'm not willing to invest in myself, why should my boss be willing to invest in me? And so I would take things on that I thought would help me out of my own pocket. And so I got to be so good that guess what happened? People would come in and say, "Hey, Richard, would you consider coming over to our company?" Well, yeah, I was making pretty good money, and someone made the offer of twice as much money as I was making. So I had never thought about making six figures before, but that was the offer. And surprise, surprise, I took that offer, and it was because of investing in myself. I normally have 3 minutes, so Gary, I'll wrap it up. But to say, recognizing there's more, and then I've got to find a way to get there was probably the key to rising to the ranks.
Well, what I heard, Richard, was you invested in yourself and you positioned yourself well. You raised your hand and positioned yourself well to have more opportunities and learn more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to move to Terrance next. Same question. It could be a series of happenings, but was there a significant or what happened sort of in your career or in your life that helped you rise up through the ranks, or what made the difference for your career? And again, as we leave Richard, who is an owner of his own company, the next three individuals are at high levels, either directors at very high levels with their company. So Terrance, tell us about anything that relates to this question from your experiences.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gary. For me, it was several different things. I think, Richard, really hit it on the head when he said about being present. I think it was required. I got into this business when I was a really young guy. And, I think the thing that was the separator for me and the differentiator was being present. I think as a minority, I understood that, the opportunities aren't as readily available to me as maybe some of my counterparts or some of my peers. So it required that I was always available, that I was always present, that I was always going to have to work a little bit harder, a little bit longer, and raise my hand quite a bit to get recognized. Number one, because I was young. Number two, because I was African American. And the only way that I was going to really be able to get that recognition to separate myself from, I guess, the rest, so to speak, was to do just that. As a result of that, I think, the next piece is, you have to have advocates. And that doesn't just go for minorities. I think that just goes for everybody. But you really need somebody who's going to advocate for you. But it begins with, you having to be, there. You just can't expect. I know certainly as an African-American man, I can't expect things are going to get handed to me. The world just does not work that way for me. I have to have always understood that, I'm going to have to work that much harder. As a result of that, I had a mentor of mine who happened to be a white male who was a great advocate of mine. And, but I can't also say that, it was all just through hard work. Some of it was, I don't want to say luck, but the reality was that I got into my role and I started to rise through the ranks because the company that I was working for at that time was associated with General Electric. And General Electric was big on the GE, the meatball company was big on diversity, equity, inclusion. They were pushing those young, high potential leaders through the organization. And so they sort of forced the hand of the company I was working for, because I can't say if that hadn't happened, that I would be sitting here today, to be honest with you. They were sort of forced into that situation to sort of open that door. But once the door is open, it's my responsibility to kick it down and sort of push through and try to excel inside of it. And I think for everybody on the panel today, you'll probably hear from Tiffany and Keith and Richard that they wouldn't sit in the seats that they sit in today had that not have been the case. Just being like everybody else is, for lack of a better term, not okay. It's not going to work for you if you're just part of the pack. The reality is that, again, those opportunities aren't going to present themselves. And then sometimes you need a little luck to go your way. You need an advocate or somebody to say, hey, this young woman, this young man, they actually have the ability to sort of move forward. And I think that we should be putting them forward. But I think it starts with the individual, and that requires you to, again, outwork everybody.
Terrance, thanks so much. Starting to hear a trend, but a little bit of a different. I like how you brought out the advocate piece. So Keith, we'll move to you next. Same question. Any significant things over the course of your life or career that have helped you rise through the ranks?
Absolutely. I think a lot of similar themes that Terrance just expressed. I think clearly what goes without saying is you have to be supremely capable and supremely competent to be able to put yourself in positions. So clearly hard work and preparation and development individually is a big important part of that. But the reality is, no one gets in. None of us are successful on our own. Hard work is, on its own won't get you there. There is a bit of luck, like Terrence mentioned. Being in the right place at the right time with the right skill set for the right task is also important. But I know for me, there was some key people who helped me to rise through the ranks earlier in my career when I was in corporate America. I was one of the top candidates that was part of this Fortune 500 company. And interestingly enough, out of the top candidates, there was one candidate who got promoted before me. And I could probably be okay with that because he was pretty good. It was really picked, not very big difference in terms of capability. But then a second candidate was promoted, and clearly I was much stronger than that candidate, to the point that every time someone would come into the region, they'd have me work with people, get them trained, and these people continually would be promoted. And even this person that got promoted felt guilty and came to me because he recognized, I was probably a little stronger performer than this individual. But the difference was at that point, I had African American who was a regional manager at that time, who also knew me and believed in me and was able to advocate for me. And it wasn't just in him, but there was also other advocates I had who were, for instance, were white males who recognized, because of the relationships we developed, my capacity. So I said, ultimately, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it was that company's ability to put an African American in a higher position and to hire people who had like-minded commitments to diversity and inequity that allowed them to say, wait a minute, you're not going to keep passing over this guy. We're going to give this guy an opportunity. And I would say throughout my career, almost every job I've taken, it's been someone who's approached me because they realized I had a unique skill set and it fit their agenda and their need.
Keith, thank you so much. That seems super valuable in my mind, what you're bringing out. I'm going to move to Tiffany. Same question. Anything in your career, your life that you feel was impactful or helped you or made a difference in your career path?
Sure. I would definitely agree with the gentleman that have spoken earlier in terms of having an advocate. I actually look at it as we talk about having a champion, someone that is willing to step out there and be vulnerable for you and believe in you, right? That's very important. And I also believe in the whole pull as you go. So having someone that recognizes that, but by grace, they wouldn't have had the opportunity. So here, let me try to help you out as well. Because what I find is it's not in when we're talking about how do we help people rise up in the rankings, it's not typically an issue of talent. It's more of an issue of opportunity. And we don't always have someone to step in our defense. And I was reminded of a TED Talk that was brought to my attention, reminding me about we sit around waiting for someone to come along and put this tiara on our head and promote us, as opposed to being an advocate for ourselves, to speak to what we are capable of doing and what we've done, what we've accomplished, and why we are the right person that for that particular position, whatever that may look like. And then being able to say, okay, well, if not me, why not? What do I need to do to put myself in a better position, in a better light the next time? So when the opportunity presents itself, that I remove that excuse, that logic that you have given for me not being placed in that promotional opportunity. So for me, I have done things to put me in that position in terms of professional development, whether that is joining clubs such as Toastmasters, whether that is making sure my education is at least at the same level of others or greater. When I have an opportunity to sit on a board, I make sure that I do that. And I think that the biggest thing is, yes, what others see as or described as luck. I think we're all talking about being blessed, just being fortunate, because we were the ones that had the opportunity. And now what do we do with that? Do we use that opportunity to help others that we think may have been overlooked and possess some of the same qualities and character that we had when we were being overlooked? So, okay, now let me operate with some intentionality so that I can help you. And hopefully you have the mindset of helping others.
That's awesome. If I were to try to quickly summarize, because I'm learning too as we go. Every time I have these conversations, I continue to learn. But I'm hearing, work hard, position yourself, get the education, raise your hand. But I also hear, and this is what I want to encourage others that are in leadership, be a mentor, help pull up, because there's probably a lot of people that get weary in well-doing, or they get burnt out. I tried, and I am working hard, Keith. Why, and I'm still in the same position, right? I'm sure there's a ton of people that can nod their heads to that. So it may take, in some of those cases, luck, like some of you mentioned, but maybe someone who looks like me that's in a higher position really helping elevate or pull them up, as Tiffany was saying. So I want what you all heard, I hope will sit with some of our leaders to look for opportunities. As we get older, some of us that are older, we want to know that we've left a legacy. We want to improve the company that we have or we own or we run. And so to create a more diverse leadership group, I think makes everything better for everybody. So hopefully that's a takeaway for some that may not be in the minority status who are listening to what you all are saying. Really appreciate those answers. Let's make another round here of another question, and this one maybe is more geared towards situational situations at work or around the water cooler kind of thing or whatever. But tell us about how you've handled a situation that you faced that was either some sort of a setback. Keith even mentioned being overlooked in a promotional opportunity. But maybe more in particular, like if you're around people joking about race or an off-color question or joke, how do you handle that when you're around people, or have you been in a situation like that? I want to start with you, Richard.
Okay, this is one that is not, ladies and gentlemen, uncommon at all. And it's not just about Black people, but same thing about women, things about folks that are LGBTQIA, et cetera, people that are not the majority. It happens. One of the things that it may sound trivial and petty, but when I know that I've been wronged, for example, somebody has done something unfairly towards me and I'm stuck with that. Something that I learned and I believe very much is the best revenge is success. And I've always believed that. So it's not about getting back at that person. It's about me getting further ahead to do well, to do better. So you gave me some lemons. And so this lemonade, not only is it going to be good, but it's going to be a national seller and it's going to go nationwide. Thank you for hey, so that's an important one for me. The best revenge is success. Now, the comments, there's something, at least in my life as an African American man in this country, there's a term called death by 1,000 cuts, and that is just constant, over and over, joking comments that people think are funny, or people are just ignorant and say things that just have no idea. I have learned over the years not to let that go. I don't jump in anyone's face, because I got to work with folks, right? Especially when you have your own company. It's not a good idea to piss people off and then expect them to hire you the next month. But I do now say, when things are talked about this, and I remember in the toll meeting, well, we've got to separate the blacklist for these bad tolls. And I raise my hand for those types of comments. Oh, just a second. Just want you to know, as the only Black man in here, when you use terms like blacklist mean bad, as a Black man, I don't think you understand how I feel about that. Because I look around, I'm the only Black person in here. Black is bad. And so when you get things like blacklist and you get email lists that are, get on the blacklist. Oh, but if you want to have an email, we'll put you on the white list. And I do bring that up and say, I don't know if you've ever thought about that from the perspective of somebody whose skin is dark, but it's not very comfortable. Surprisingly enough, I've had people tell me tell me, it was probably about 13 years later, we're at a conference in the exhibit hall. Hey, Richard, how you doing? And we talked about our days on the committee, and he'll say, I never forgot that meeting you said, and he explained word for word what I had said. He said, I never said that as a result of that conversation. And you talk about something feeling good, because it wasn't an easy thing to say to stop the disruption, certainly when you're the minority in the room. But it makes a difference, because as I will always say, people, not all the time, but most of the time, people don't know what they don't know. So I'll turn it back over to you, Gary.
Thank you, Richard. Terrence, how about, do you have any techniques or ways that you have had to handle setbacks because of your minority status or off-color jokes, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I would say this, if you've worked for any length of time in corporate America, it's as a person of color, it's probably inescapable. You've definitely been confronted with that circumstance and situation. I have on multiple occasions. People often say to me, Terrence, you seem to be a little bit unapproachable. You're so stoic. It's just because, I think as a minority, we come in with our guard up. We can't just necessarily be as open and just as free as some of our counterparts. Oftentimes, those situations or those circumstances, it goes without saying, are incredibly hurtful. I think the thing that we also face is, okay, after this happens, who do I turn to? Like, we talked about advocates on the last go around, a question, like, who's going to be my advocate to sort of help me with this? I think, oftentimes, we've sort of just had to learn how to take it and just, sort of ignore it and, hey, or be told, oh, he didn't really mean that, or, she didn't really mean that, it wasn't such a big deal. I just think people just have to recognize, hey, those moments and those situations are exceptionally hurtful. It makes us, not to generalize, but it makes us sort of retreat a little bit, and how we deal with it. Again, we just can't be as free and open in those particular circumstances and those situations. So, when you see, a minority walk into a room and you're in a situation and, and it doesn't, like, to Richard said, it could be, any different group. It could be LGBTQ plus, it could be African American, it could be Latino, it could be women, it could be whatever. You have to be sensitive to those things because, trust me, the hurt that it brings to that person in that particular situation, it cuts deep. But I also understand, like Richard said, how I react to it and how I deal with it, everybody's paying attention to it because it's easy to be labeled the angry Black man. That's a real term. That's a real thing. So oftentimes I have to be very diplomatic in my approach and somewhat dismissive, like, hey, okay, and I've had to sort of create a workaround for myself in that particular moment to sort of let the air out of the room. But I still carry that home with me. I still have to take that back with me. I still have to live with that every single day. So as you're walking through your corporate life, walking through those situations, I would just ask for anybody who's listening on this, just be mindful of that, because in that moment, it may seem like, oh, he got over it or she got over it. But trust me, it carries forward in a long way and for a long time.
Terrence, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Keith, same thing. You got anything to share with us on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. And great question. I know, again, at one point in my career, I was probably about a month and a half of discussions with a colleague about a project, and they were really impressed with what they thought I could help with the project. So I flew in town to the corporate headquarters, and of course, my name is not you can't tell I'm African American by looking at my name. Right. And, my diction was incredibly concise and consistent with proper English. So you couldn't necessarily know I was a Black person with how I spoke. But when I walked into that room, that individual lost all the color in their face, began to stammer and stutter because they were shocked that I was actually a Black man. And in that instance, I recognized, okay, I'm not in a good situation. this person most likely is going to do something to derail my career. So then I began to pull back on history from being raised by my parents to understand that I am good, I'm sufficient, and the things I've been doing to prepare myself and make sure that I'm going to handle everything. And I was fortunate enough to have, as I mentioned earlier, some advocates that I could quickly alert them of the situation, and made sure I did a bang-up job so that there was nothing that could be said. Now, the benefit was after the fact, when this person tried to put a negative spin on my performance, it was documented. I already had advocates to stop it, so they weren't able to derail my career as a result of that. But something that Terrence said is really important is people who have that attitude, they have a perspective of a cultural arrogance. In other words, what they assume is their cultural and ethnic perspective is superior to somebody else's cultural and ethnic perspective. And when you have that position, that causes you to always place yourself in a superior position and need to place somebody in an inferior position. If we're really trying to have diversity and equity and comfort in a workplace, all of us, including myself, have to recognize that all of us have cultural and ethnic predispositions, and we have to be very careful not to place ourselves or anybody else in a position of superiority or inferiority.
That is great stuff. Thanks for sharing that. I saw our good friend Kim Jackson nodding vigorously. I remember her telling me a story about going into a boardroom and somebody looked at her and said, "Oh, you're Kim Jackson," because they didn't know. So similar in the name Keith or Kim. Tiffany, have you had any work-related scenarios that were considered a setback in your own mind or inappropriate comments that you've had to deal with, and how did you deal with it?
I'm sure, yes, I would say so. I think mine probably comes more in meeting settings where, first of all, let me say that it really is annoying to me. I think it's very disrespectful when people say, "Oh my gosh, you talk white." What exactly does that mean? So I know Keith mentioned having proper grammar or speaking with good dialect, or maybe you put your nouns and verbs where they belong. And it's offensive when and if people say that. But I do know Richard mentioned earlier, people don't know what they don't know. So I'm not going to immediately be offended when people say things that I think are a little not nice, right? But after I advise you, hey, that didn't set real well, then the next time I hear it or you say it again, and then I'm offended because you're doing this intentionally, or you're not having enough emotional intelligence to not be offensive. I know for me, because and I teach Sunday school, and I would have to tell my male students to be careful that you don't show up like the angry black man Terrance. So I tell them, be careful that you are able to articulate yourself in a manner that doesn't appear to be threatening to others, because that is a stereotype, that you're an angry black man. For me, it has been that black women have attitudes, because I might speak a little differently, or I might move my head a little more dramatically, then that would mean I have an attitude. So I had to make sure that I was purposely using dialect, that my body language didn't appear to be threatening in any way, that I made sure that I softened things up a bit so that no one would think I was speaking with an attitude, that because that my passion didn't come off as me having an attitude or even angry. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't show anger in the workplace. My level of anger is way too inappropriate to be in the workplace. So you couldn't be further off from the truth. Now, if you ask my children what anger looks like, then yes. And so I think that, yes, we've all experienced it. Or most of us have an interaction where something was said. Mine had to be with me being very passionate in a meeting and being accused of being angry, and I wasn't. Mine has to be with being in a meeting and being overlooked, being introduced as the director, and I have my assistant director with me that happens to be a white male, and when other white men would talk to him, their attention would be gravitated to him as if I didn't exist. I know it's been known as, I have my invisible suit on today. I'm like, hello, hey, I'm here. But he does a great job of redirecting things back to me. And I'm very fortunate in that he'll say, well, Tiffany needs to speak to that, or that's Tiffany's decision. And then I'm like, yeah, hey guys, I do need to speak to that. So I think for me, I try to do a lot of work with softening things up so that I can dispel the stereotypes and make sure that if you have felt threatened or intimidated in some way, that's on you. That's not on me.
Very good. What my takeaway from this round is, I'll go back to Richard's. I like the idea of rise above it. So from the minority perspective, take something that could be negative and rise above it. Don't just make lemonade out of lemons, but make a nationwide bestseller. But also, and Melanie, was Monica, over in chat, if you guys aren't paying attention to chat, there's a couple of really great things in there, but use those opportunities as teaching moments. So I'll say this to just the non-minority group and the minority group. Like Richard mentioned, the topic of a black list versus a white list. When you have time and it's appropriate, you ought to address those things. And I think non-minorities, we need to be able to be open to hear that. Oh, this is a term I've been using forever. I didn't realize, but maybe I won't realize unless you bring that up. So I think there's sometimes that you got to bite your lip, and this goes for everybody. Sometimes you just hold your tongue, and then sometimes it's an appropriate, learning, teachable moment. And so we should look for those opportunities as well. Does that make sense? Am I getting it right there? Okay, we're going to skip to the last questions. We are rolling around about the 45-minute mark here, I think. I want to shift what we're talking about. We've talked about individual stories and examples and how individuals may deal with things at work, but let's turn it more towards leadership in companies and how we can enable folks to rise up through the ranks, how we can enable pathways for minorities more. And I've said this once before in a couple of groups, but Tiffany and I were just having a conversation about her experience years and years ago when she went to back when it was maybe IPI or even IPMC, and looking around the room and not seeing a lot of people that look like her, and then coming back 5 or 6, 7 years ago and seeing a big difference. And that's great. And our industry is doing a great job. But one of the things that I have noticed, and we've talked about this, if you look at our different verticals within the industry, a lot of our people of color and minorities, women, whatever, in leadership roles, we find more so in the municipal environments or university. The hiring practices are a little bit more driven. But when you look out into the commercial world, sometimes our vendors, suppliers, consultants, you don't see it as much. And so we can tell that we're not there in the municipal and university world yet either, but there's a lot of opportunity. And so that's kind of where I want to shift this. How can we help companies, help agencies, help leaders, supervisors, managers who are in a hiring position or a mentoring position do better at creating pathways for people to rise up through the ranks? So basically the question for each of you is going to be, what tips or strategies would you offer to leaders or organizations to assist in either hiring or creating a more diverse leadership team within their ranks? And so we'll go in the same order. Start off with Richard. What do you have for us on that as a takeaway?
Well, I would, because I'm involved in a lot of different things, DEI with different organizations, and this is a question that's that we're trying to help our people understand. So the answer, from a leadership standpoint, I'd say open your eyes to your team, right? Because your team is what's going to make you successful. That's what's going to make the job work. And you hired them. In this case, you hired them. They bring some great gifts, and it's up to you to get those gifts. Allow them to use those. And so just the thought here, and I know we've had an IPMI discussion on the forum about returning to the office or working from home, and the scenario of bringing a new employee and introducing them down the hall to people really resonated with me, because I know that, I met Kim, and she had this picture of Princeton, and I want to talk to her later, right? I never would have known that had I not walked down the hall and see it, as opposed to on the phone. This is Kim, hi, this is Amy. Hi, this is Sean. Oh, hello, welcome. I don't know anything about it. So that's important to understand your folks and their need to network. And so when you have a networking event, you know what, we just won this big contract, or we just got the grant, and you guys did a great job. We're going to go on me. We're going to go down to Paul's pulled pork emporium, and it's happy hour. Everything's on me, right? And so, but you don't think that there's 12% of your staff, A, don't eat pork, and B, don't drink alcohol, so they don't show up, surprisingly enough, or they go and they're reserved, they're out back in the corner. I tell you what, that Rachel, she didn't go to the event. I think she's maybe not a good fit for the team. She's an excellent fit for the team. It's just that you're doing events that aren't inclusive of everybody's needs. And you may not know, and this is something larger and larger that people are or are not aware of, how prevalent alcoholism is and people struggling with alcohol, right? And so to take your team and do team building events surrounded by alcohol, and you're surprised because Melanie never shows up. She's good and she's got a lot to offer, but you're making it difficult. And you may not, you're probably doing it because you don't have a clue just what your team is and what their makeup is and how to pull the best out of it. And we don't do a very good job of that. And we can do better. All you got to do is, I hate to say it, wake up to who your people are.
Very good.
There's a lot more to share, but we can do that over iced tea in Tampa. So I'll turn it over to you, Gary.
We'll see you at the bar, Richard. Just kidding. Hey, Terrance, and you are, I will say, I probably don't know what all our different companies are doing specifically in the area of DEI, but congrats to you for also playing a role, and to Laz for creating that space. But I know, so you're thinking about this not just because you're a minority, but it's a position that you're now holding within your organization. But maybe what are some things that you all have done, or what are things that you could advise other companies to take a look at that you feel like are successful in creating good pathways for minorities?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. One of the things that we've done internally with Laz, and I'll talk a little about what we've done internally, and then some suggestions for external. But internally, we've created pathways. You have to create pathways for minorities from all these different groups that you identify, whether it be LGBTQ+, African American, Latino, women, whatever you have to create pathways. So we started a mentoring program where we have senior folks within the organization who, we require the applicants, so to speak, from these different groups to apply, write an essay. Why do you feel like you need to be mentored? What are some of your career goals? How do you want to move through the organization? I think, Tiffany said it, and I think maybe you said it earlier too. In the municipal world, you will find a lot more minorities. That's not so much the case in corporate America. I think one of the things I told you before is I'm always looking for the next me. There are not a lot of me's out there in corporate America, in the mobility industry. I, published an article a little bit earlier this year, and I spoke to challenging companies. Like, if you go on your website and look at your executive profiles and everybody looks like you're missing the mark. You're not getting it right. You have to challenge yourself. And I think, we've done it. We've tried to do a good job with Laz with this mentoring program. We've had it in place now for about the last 10 months. And just even watching the growth from those folks that say entered 10 months ago, I can speak to 3 or 4 different people who've been in the program, who've been promoted and are now promotable and are sort of moving through the ranks just in the last 10 months. So we've seen the benefit of that, and it's been a very good thing. The other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to create we're designating them as symposiums specific to each one of these groups. I'm holding my very first symposium, which I'm probably going to be leaning into Tiffany, Richard, and Keith. They don't know it yet. To help me with this symposium, I'm having an African American symposium in January during Martin Luther King week. And we're bringing in 25 to 30 African American high potential leaders within the organization. We're creating a workshop over a couple days and developing content for them. Because to Richard's point, you have to have that networking. You have to have, I am the only me in the executive profile, right? So as you look at that, it's funny. I travel around the country. People within my own organization don't even know me. They don't even know I exist. So you have to create that network, and you have to open up those opportunities to bring senior professionals in like Keith and Richard and Tiffany so they can talk about just what we're doing here. So that would be internal, what we're working on. Externally, I would just challenge companies. You have to be intentional. I led a panel discussion early part of this year on creating heterogeneous teams, which we did internally for our town halls. You have to be intentional. I hear people all the time, we tried to find a minority candidate for this position. They're just not out there. Listen, let me tell you, I know a lot of African-American professionals, who are in my friend circle. Oh, we're out there, but you have to go find us. And we're not that hard to find. So when I hear, we tried, you don't know, it's just not a lot of this CFOs out there. There's not a lot of people sitting in C-suite positions. I just find that hard to really lean into and to buy into. I just think it's easy just to sort of check a box, but are you really trying? So you have to be intentional. You have to be deliberate in your approach. And guess what? It's hard work. It's going to take it may take a little bit longer. It may take to get to the right person. But if you're really serious about it and you really want to be about it, you'll take the time to do that, because if you create a more diverse team inside of your company, you'll benefit from it. If everybody comes into a meeting, if I'm going in to present to Keith or to Tiffany and I have my team with me and everybody on that team looks the same, you're not going to get different shared thoughts. You have to be able, like Tiffany, if I brought in a team of 6 white males and they sat in front of Tiffany, how's that going to go? How's it going to go? As opposed to if I have maybe Richard or Keith, I have an African-American female or a Latino female or somebody from that is something that people can really, and that's the reality of the world is we aren't what we are 25, 30 years ago. 25, 30 years ago, to your point, I walked into this industry and there were definitely no me's. I go to the, IPI 20 years, there was no me's, but, to see those changes happening, and you can see more of us in those situations and circumstances now. If you don't feel like you need to move your organization in that direction, trust me, you're missing the mark. So externally, I would just say be intentional on how you go about it, because you will win and your business will grow and you'll actually be more successful by doing just that.
Awesome, Terrence. Yeah, I'm seeing a round of applause going on. Great comments. Keith, any additional strategies, anything you can add from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that you have to do as an organization, all your leaders, all the within the organization first need to begin to ask themselves these questions. How do I feel when somebody has a different political view than I do? Does that bother me? How do I feel when somebody has a different religious view than me? Does that bother me? How do I feel when somebody has a different ethnic view and speaks about their experience as a black man or as a woman or as an LTGB, part of the LTGBQ community or the Asian community? Do those things bother me? If they do, that means you will not have the ability to create the culture and environment for a diverse and equitable workplace, because you will have a bias that doesn't see yourself having contributions or being led or being corrected or being directed by somebody who has a different ethnicity, who has a different sexual orientation, who has a different belief or political belief, and that is, without recognizing that, you can't correct that. And then secondly, after you do that, you then have to be intentional of having training and sessions that help you to overcome those cultural practices. And we all know that diversity and equity is critical to the success of an organization, especially as splintered as our country has become. Right. You can't continue to be monolithic in how you provide services and goods and think you're going to continue to meet increasingly diverse groups of Americans. So this is a need to be successful. Even with diversity and equity is a need to be successful. Terrence also said something, and Tiffany spoke about this, and Richard spoke about this in different ways. You also then can't recruit with the same tools you recruit before. If you're talking about finding African Americans or women, and you're using the same tools that people who have had an advantage in their education, in their job opportunities. There's no way you then can have that same standard to find an African American who didn't get the same opportunities. Instead, a better way to approach it is to simply say, do I need to have certain educational things, or do I need the ability to solve a problem and to think creatively and to find a way to make stuff happen? Is that who I'm talking to? Because that person always has a job. The person who has all the educational requirements and all the experience doesn't necessarily have a job. The person who changes your organization, your company, is a person who can figure it out, a person who can adapt, and a person who can make things happen.
Awesome, Keith. Hey, while I get ready to shift it to Tiffany, Richard, Keith, and Terrence, if you can look over in chat, Josh asked a really great question about what can be done within the parking and transportation to expand diversity and how jobs are recruited for. So if there's anything you guys have, please type that, or anybody else that's on the call that has some, that to me, this is one of the main things that we're trying to accomplish today, is to answer that question that Josh has. But Tiffany, tips, strategies within organizations to help with upward mobility.
Sure. One of the things I had recommended in the chat, and I'm putting these corporate silver and platinum and gold sponsors on basically, I'm calling you guys out. Let's do some type of scholarship program. Let's have a way for people that are lower in the ranks that represent some of these minority groups to come to IPMI, to see your Terrance, to see your Richard, to see people in these high places and know, hey, that could be me, and use those mentorships through there. To me, the word intentionality is a buzzword, yeah, but it is imperative that we do things with some intentionality in place. So you can have a DIE all you want, and you can say that you're all about inclusion and equity, but until you start line your audio up with your video, it's just talk. Now let's look at your statistics. Where have we seen these opportunities to come as a realization for those people, not just the front line? I'm not wanting you to check your boxes that you have a representation of 30% in your organization and they're all saying, hi, can I have, that'll be $5.50. No, I want to see some of these at the table. Are they decision makers? Are they able to be in a position to help others? And that's when we'll start seeing a change in our industry and in our world. But until we go casting our nets out in better opportunities or better environments where we'll find different talent pools, where we'll be able to find some diversity, then we can't change that. So I'm excited about even having this dialogue and having people here that are interested in this. But now what do? Are we going to be a champion? Are we going to get out there and change things? Because otherwise, you know what'll happen? We'll be having the same conversation in 10 years. And that's sad. Can't hear you, Gary. Gary, you're still on mute.
Thank you. It was my goal to not be told that, and I got all the way to the 2-minute mark, and I did it. So there's some great conversations going on over in chat. If anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question, look, we got another minute or so. If anyone wants to do it that way, feel free. I'll stop talking here in a second, or type in chat. We can knock out a few more things before we wrap it up. Anybody? It's been amazing to see. There's 56 or so, at least, participants I see, and I think everyone stayed on the whole entire hour, and that's just quite amazing. And you can tell this topic is hitting home with some folks. But any question real quick? And that's okay. The quietness is okay. I've been seeing some great questions over there. It's all, sometimes when there's 50-something people looking at you, asking a question in front of that crowd might be intimidating. But hopefully you've learned something. I want to thank the panelists, Tiffany, Richard, Keith, Terrance. You guys have been amazing. Yes, Kim's giving you a round of applause. I'm sure everyone else is. I've been seeing some great comments. Really, really, really appreciate it. This has been really, really fun and also enlightening. But I love what Tiffany was just saying. We can't stop here. We got to keep these conversations going, and let's make a difference, at least, in our own circles and in our own industry. Let's make a difference. And with that, I'll wrap it up. I don't know, Kim or anybody from IPMI will do a full-on wrap here, but we're good from our perspective. Thanks, everybody.
I will. thank all our panelists for being with us today. This has been a phenomenal conversation, very eye-opening. I know I learned a ton. I'm sure the rest of you did too. And we are very much looking forward to continuing it, which we'll do on this platform, which we can do on forum at any time, and we'll continue our DEI series in the magazine in Parking and Mobility, which Gary also spearheads for us. So thank you for that. Our next Shop Talk will be held on December 8th. We'll be talking about the year that was 2021 and what lies ahead for our industry and our members in the next year. I hope you all mark your calendars, and we would love to see you. We also hope to see you in Tampa at the end of this month at the 2021 IPMI Parking and Mobility Conference and Expo in person. You can still register for that. The website is ipmi.parking-mobility.org. We can't wait to see you. Thank you all again for participating today. Thank you very much to all of our panelists for your time and your insight. That concludes today's event. You can now disconnect. Have a great afternoon.